What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Recovery Couch. I'm your host, Brandon Couch, and today I'm joined by Jay Miller. Jay's story is a story of redemption and resilience, and it is a story you won't soon forget. Jay opens up about his journey through addiction, the wounds of early exposure to pornography, and the heartbreak of divorce that spiraled into homelessness and legal troubles. But Jay's story doesn't end there, because when Jay surrendered his life to God, everything changed. Jay's testimony is a powerful reminder that no one is too far gone for healing, and that Jesus meets us right in the middle of our brokenness. Sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Jay Miller right after a word from our sponsor. This episode of the Recovery Couch is brought to you by Greg Swartz at Remax Victory and Affiliates. Whether you're buying or selling your home, Greg brings heart, hustle, and honesty to every deal. Call Greg at 937-477-8975 today. Welcome back, podcast family, to another episode of the Recovery Couch. Today's guest is a man who knows what it means to lose everything and still choose healing. Jay Miller's recovery journey began in 2016, and it hasn't been easy. He's walked through divorce, homelessness, jail time for a false accusation, and the weight of a long-standing sexual addiction that nearly consumed his life. But Jay didn't stay in that broken place. Through surrender, accountability, and the grace of God, Jay's found healing. He's found deliverance, and he's found purpose. He's been living on the other side of broken for years now, and today he's using his voice to bring others out of hiding and into freedom. Jay is the host of the Unfeigned podcast, and I'm honored to sit down with him today. We want to welcome you, Jay, to the Recovery Couch. How you doing, brother?
Good. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Yeah, man, it's my pleasure. So give us a little bit of background, especially what was going on prior to 2016 that kind of led you into homelessness and all of that, jail time.
Yeah. So prior to 2016, I had been married for it was just about 20 years. Going back from when I was little, I had a real strong addiction to pornography, a real heavy sex addiction that I brought into my marriage. A lot of bridges I never burned. I found my first videotape from my parents when I was 5 years old. So it was from when I was 5 years old and I got married in 2000. And so that was a long time. So I didn't have a faith background, a Christian background, and so I kind of just navigated this all myself. So prior to 2016, I had been dealing with a lot of hiding, trying to, my whole life was about needing this applause, I needed to feel like I was the man. And so I kind of sought after those things. That's where all my attention went, was trying to get that feeling. Pornography, my sexual addiction was like a coping mechanism for me. So prior to 2016, I had kind of been living, two different lives. One life was my married life, reality, kids, and then this fantasy life where I was trying to chase this, this feeling of I'm the man, and it was through sexual addiction that I was trying to cope with that. And so obviously bringing that into my marriage led to a lot of brokenness in my marriage. And in 2016, after I had an affair, and after that, my wife and I at the time decided, hey, we're going to try to give this marriage a go. What are we going to do here? So we decided we're going to try to make it work. And at that moment, when I had that affair, and it was sort of like I got like punched in the gut, because I never thought I would be that person. And up until that point, I really didn't think of the implications. I partied, I chased sex, and when that happened, I immediately felt like disgusting. And so that started sort of the healing journey for me, and trying to redeem my marriage, and then so it was maybe a couple of years after I got a divorce, but Up until 2016, my life had been filled with a lot of hiding and trying to, show people what I wanted them to see, and hiding all the brokenness and all the addiction. So it was rough.
So let me ask you this, Jay. You said 5 years old is when you found your first adult video. What's that like as a boy? Confusing. I mean, you're 5 years old, dude.
Yeah.
Tell
Yeah.
us, like, yeah, I mean, because I have my own history with early childhood sexual trauma
Yeah.
that started with adult videos at a very young age, right? And
Yeah.
it's like well, I want to hear what that's like for you at 5 years old, man.
Yeah. Oh man. So, at the time, both my parents worked, and I would walk to school, and so I would get home before them and before my brothers and sisters. And so, I'm 5 years old and kind of restless. So just trying to figure out, I'm just hanging out. And so I would go into my parents' room and, I'd explore. And so I came across this video. And at that point, I didn't know what it was, honestly. And I didn't have any idea what sex was and sexuality and all that. And so I put in this video. And by the title of the video, I still didn't know what it was. And so I put it in. And I'll tell you what, when I saw what I saw, it was extremely confusing, because I didn't know even what to expect. Two, I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know what they were doing. I didn't know how to make sense of why they were doing those things. And so everything became confusing. And then my own sexuality became confusing, because then I thought, well, wait, is that what it's supposed to be? And so is that what I'm supposed to search for? Is that how I'm supposed to treat women? And the video that I saw, and which is pornography, the women are treated like objects. And so that started to shape my view of how to treat women. And I kind of looked at the female body as just an object. And so it was all confusing. For a 5-year-old, I was, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to make of it. And it just it opened up this world of like pain and confusion.
And so you go years down the road, you find a woman you love, you get married, you're in this marriage, and it's like so many stories I've heard, Jay, including my own, where you rewind almost subconsciously to that 5-year-old boy. Now you according to the state of whatever state you live in,
right,
you own this object.
Yeah. Yep.
And how do you navigate that healing from, man, I really didn't live up to the husband I promised to be,
right,
to navigating like, okay, I started learning things at 5 years old that no 5-year-old should really ever learn.
right.
And I have to go back and heal that young boy before I can ever start to like heal this grown man.
Right.
How'd you navigate that?
Yeah. So, and that whole time, I didn't know Christ. I didn't have faith, and I got into a lot of other things as well, which my discovery of pornography just led me to explore all these other things like the occult and things like that. And so, I bring all of that throughout my life. And there was a moment when I was in high school, and because throughout my life, something inside me said that wasn't right. Like I knew somewhere deep down that that's not how it was supposed to be, but I didn't know how to make sense of it. And so at one point, and I used to be like this hopeless romantic, right? Because I thought like that fairy tale was like, right? And so that's what I wanted. And so there was this struggle inside of me between, what I discovered in the sexual realm, and then my desire to like actually know what love is. And so when I was in high school, I wrote poetry and all this kind of stuff. And I wrote a poem for a girl, and she said, basically, she gave back to me, and her words were, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever read." And so at that moment, now I've carried all of this sexual perversion with me. I'm trying to decide, like, hey, no, I think love is a real thing that doesn't look like this. And then that happens, and I made a vow to myself that I would never feel that again. And so at that moment, I fully gave in to the sexual perversion world. And so that's when I really got immersed in pornography, really started just hooking up with everybody, because I never was going to feel my heart break like that again. So I carried that through college, I carried that into my marriage, and never dealt with any of that. And I thought I didn't think that when I got married it would all go away, but I thought that now I could just shift my focus onto my wife and that it would take care of everything. I had become a Christian in 1999, got married in 2000, and but I never really owned my salvation. Wasn't walked through it, and so my whole marriage was that same fight that since I was 5 years old was I'm supposed to love this woman. I know how I'm supposed to be, but yet I've never dealt with this sexual addiction that I have, and so it was hiding and getting caught, then hiding and then getting caught. It was this cycle. And then once the affair happened, which again, that was the worst place I've ever been. Once that happened, I had to go back and figure out the why. Like, why am I this way? You know, am I always going to be broken? Will I ever be different? And so I had to go back and figure out why at 5 years old, when I discovered that, why it made me feel a certain way, what I kept chasing. And it was a long road to figuring this out. And it really started with figuring out what I needed. So what was it in me that I was trying to get or chase? And that's where I kind of discovered this, as I was from a young age being raised, everything was about winning. And so I had to be the best athlete. I had to be the best in front of people. You know, it was this image I had to keep up, and I had to make sure that they thought I was the man. And so when I discovered that pornography, the man in the video was in control and he was the man. And so that just kind of gave me that false sense of, oh, I'm the man. And so I had to go back and I had to discover that. I didn't know where that came from. I had to go back and discover that I had this need for like this applause because I felt like that's where my worth came from. And so that was really rough. That was rough going back and having to go back to 5 years old, and then all through middle school and high school and college and then my marriage, and kind of reliving all of those moments where I was stuck in this sexual fantasy world, and then figuring out like why would I do that? So that was hard.
Tell me this, Jay. So where I'm from, if you had an adult video or if you had magazines, like you were kind of the man. You're talking about being the man. Like,
yeah.
Other people would be like, want to see other kids from the neighborhood would want to see, like, so it wasn't just the videos itself. And this is in my world, but I'm speaking to a bigger question in your world. So in my world, it was like cool to watch that, to have that, to own that, to talk about that, when we would, run off into the woods or,
right.
And talk about what you saw. And I mean, there was even a point in time where, I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to because it's the truth. A buddy of mine was like, when I get older, I'm going to cheat on my bitch. That's what he said. We laughed.
Yep.
We laughed hysterically.
Yep.
And I think we laughed because he said it like he meant it. He didn't say it like he was delivering a punchline.
Right.
And so in my world, and I'm trying to get to see if kind of your world was the same, this type of the man, like, treating a woman like an object, talking about it with your buddies in the locker room or riding bikes, was kind of like what the world conditioned me to believe was what a man was supposed to do. Was it the same for you?
Yes, absolutely. So that was, it was, I felt like the man was supposed to be in control. And, like you said, joking about those things. I used to joke about all those things. We used to do the same kinds of things. And it was almost like you were, like some kind of wuss or something if you didn't do that. And I remember, it's funny now knowing who I am now, but I used to make fun of the guys that were like in touch with their emotions or would treat women respectfully, right? And all the jokes we used to say and making fun of these kids. But yeah, it was definitely something where the world I lived in, the groups I ran with, even the way I was raised. I mean, my parents, they worked and they just provided, but they didn't, there wasn't a whole lot of emotional investment and things like that. But it was very much like the man. You have to be the man, and it's cool to treat women like objects, and that gave us some sort of like superiority, and that's how you had to be, because if you didn't, it was almost like you were less of a man. And so all those years of just kind of saying, no, I'm not gonna treat women respectfully because that's soft, or I'm not gonna do this with my emotions because that's soft, and yeah, you just get conditioned to start treating women like crap because you think it makes you more of a man.
And at some stage of life, it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the sad part, because how are women being conditioned for
You're
men to
right.
treat them? You
Right.
know,
Yep.
it's kind of just a sad cycle that I'm glad that we get to shed a little bit of light on, because I think, Jay, this cycle is conditioned in people at an age that we probably turned a blind eye to for a long time.
Right.
And so this image that so many young men get accustomed to, of like, I got to dominate, I got to be in a position of authority over a woman, it kind of consumed your life. It consumed mine as well. And it leads to an affair, some divorce, or a divorce. And then we get into some homelessness and jail.
Yes. So after trying to reconcile the marriage and doing what we thought we wanted to do and try to get this marriage repaired, my wife came to me and said, she doesn't want to be married, wants a divorce. And so at that time, I hadn't been looking for a place to live. I hadn't been making preparations to move out because I thought we were going to try to work on the marriage. And when that didn't work out, I had to get out. And so at the time, the house we were renting, her parents owned it, and so we were renting from them. And so logically, I would be the one to get out. So when I got out, I didn't have anywhere to go. Friends of mine, for a short time period, they let me stay in a place that they had, but it was only for a short time, and I knew that. And at that point, I had a sports and rec business. So it was like sports training, homeschool PE classes, just anything sports and recreation. And I had built it in the area where I lived. The place that my friends let me live were over an hour away. And so at that point, I was spending about $1,500 a month in gas. I had a truck for all the equipment and everything. And everything in my life was in the area where I lived. And so we kind of decided on a short period of time where I would live in their place that they had. But before that time period was up, I just made the decision to come back to the area I lived in, because that's kind of where my life was. I had already started to lose my business because being over an hour away, I couldn't get to everything at the times that I needed to. And so I had to kind of start to shut things down a little bit. So I decided, in order to make any kind of money or do anything, I had to move back to this area. Well, when I did that, I had nowhere to go. And at that point, when that decision was made, I had lost a lot of my business. So I moved to the area, just made the decision. I'll find a place, I'll do it. Well, that turned into about a year and a half of losing more of my business, living in my truck, just working jobs here and there to get gas money, to get food. And then at some point, my truck broke down, and I was living in it, and a school actually let me park it there for a little bit, and then a church let me park it there. And so I was living in this truck, but I had no way to get to anything. And so the only jobs I can do were things that I could walk to. So I was probably walking, I don't know, about 20 miles a day, just trying to do some training here and there. The money I was making, though, was to go to gas and food. And I know I'm giving you a general overview, but the big picture, over that year and a half, I'd worked some odd jobs. It was, to go to fixing the truck or keeping that running. And basically, I called it functional homelessness, because I didn't just sit in a corner and do nothing. I tried to still function day to day. And so I have 3 kids, and so I was trying to be there for them, try to go to their things. And a lot of it, when the truck went down, a lot of it was whatever I could walk to. So there was a period of time where I couldn't see them, when I couldn't get to them. And then it got to the point where it was pretty common to go about 3 or 4 days without eating. and then I would find a side job that I can do, and I would do that, and then I would get to eat. And so it was just really rough, a really long, rough period in my life. And, the truck died, so I didn't have a car for a little while, and so I mean honestly, I was breaking into places so that I could shower, so that I can sleep, you know. So it was a really rough time. I had lost everything, and I think part of it was when I went into it, my mentality was I'm going to go into this temporarily, and I'm going to figure this out, right? And I've always been the type of person that was like, there's always a way. I'll make it work. There's always a way. I'll figure it out. And I went into that. Well, then dealing with when I was kicked out and got the divorce, my whole world was turned upside down. And so my mentality was all over the place. And so I was never depressed. I all of a sudden became depressed. I never had anxiety. All of a sudden I was anxious. And so my mind was all over the place. And when I went into it with this mindset of I'm going to make this happen, my whole world was turned upside down, and I didn't even know how to be anymore. And so I was depressed. I was anxious. There were times, now I never got to the point where I attempted something, but I got to the point where I felt like I wanted to take my own life. And it was at that point when I was like, God has abandoned me. I literally started to think that maybe there is something that's too far for God to reach. Because I had been praying, like, God, I know what I did. I repented. I want my marriage. And I kept saying, God, don't you like marriage? Like, don't you want my marriage? And I was praying. And then eventually I just convinced myself, like, maybe this is too far out of God's reach. Like, I'm too far gone. All the stuff that I did, you know, what I did to my wife and my family, that I'm too far gone. And so that was the point where I just remember being like, I don't want to die because I want to be here for my kids, but I don't want to be alive either. And so it was this weird thing. Well, I was sitting in a parking lot, and I knew that the church in this parking lot had a big cross at the front of their stage. And so I broke into the church, and I went down, and I just remember falling on my knees at the stage and just surrendering everything. So I surrendered my life, I surrendered my ex-wife, I surrendered my kids, marriage, everything. And at that point is when everything turned around.
This episode of The Recovery Couch is brought to you by J.B. Davis at Performance Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram. For integrity, service, and unbeatable deals, ask for J.B. in Centerville and tell them The Recovery Couch sent you. You said in 99 was when you decided to be a Christian, but you didn't really know how to surrender,
right,
you know, everything that the world had conditioned you to believe. What you say in 2000? There was a milestone too. I didn't get to write it down because
that's when I got married in 2000.
That was the marriage.
Yep.
And even though you had this faith, for it sounds like from 99 to 2016.
Yeah.
It wasn't until you completely surrendered in this moment where you broke into a church.
Yep.
Where you finally felt like, okay, God can meet me in my brokenness. God can love me. Like there's hope for me regardless of my homelessness, my affair, you know, the sexual addiction. The world's conditioned me to the image that I've created to think that I'm in control. This moment sounds like it was a pivotal moment in your life. What's happened in your life since then?
Yes. And it was a few years after 2016, because in 2016 I had the affair, and then we kind of went through a time period where we were trying to rebuild things. So it was just a few years after where, you know, I dropped down, surrendered. And it's funny because the way I got saved, I had been living, you know, a life that I didn't think God would save. Somebody said, you have to let God give you a hug. I thought that was the dumbest thing I ever heard in my life, because I'm like, okay, like this guy you say is up there, I can't see him, and you want him to give me a hug. So I remember driving to a park, getting out of my car, looking up and being like, okay, God, give me a hug. And nothing happened, so I got back in my car, and I'm like, that's what I thought. Well, I ended up waking up in somebody's bathtub, and I don't know how I got there. So, and after I left, and I didn't know the person's house, when I got out of the bathtub, I was like, I don't even know where I'm at. When I left, I drove back to that very same park, and I got out, and all I said was, if you are who you say you are, then prove it. And at that moment, I know something happened because I used to have a terrible mouth. Everything was F this, F that, and immediately I felt really bad and disgusting about that. And so I'm like, ooh, there's something about this. But that was my conversion experience, but then that was it. I knew something had changed and I felt different and I had this desire to seek after who they were saying this God was, but that was it. So that was my salvation. So I didn't know how to walk in it. I didn't know how to. And so now fast forward to 2018-ish, and I'm surrendering, and it's the same kind of thing. When I got down, I was like, okay, God. I was like, I don't know what I believe about you. I feel like you abandoned me, but if you are who you say you are, like, here's everything. And so then I think real change happened. I know I was saved in 1999, but I really think I became a child of God when I surrendered. That's when when Jesus really had my life. And so since then, to answer your question, healing started to take place, and I started to change my mind, shift my mindset, and it started to really dive into all these things that were broken areas of my life, like my parents, my childhood, my family, the affair, the sexual addiction. I used to drink a lot, so there was that. And so it was all of this stuff diving into this stuff. And funny things that happened. All right. So I'm coming out of homelessness. So I had this little part-time job that turned into a full-time job. So now I'm like, okay, this is great. Like God's bringing me out of homelessness. I find this job. Now I can start to look for a place. The person who I worked for said, hey, why don't you come live with me? And you can live with me for a few months till you get on your feet. So I was doing that, landed this full-time job, got a place, and things started to turn around. Well, in the meantime, I needed a car. And so I got this car, and this is a whole nother podcast, but I got this car, and I bought it from a mechanic who bought it from an estate sale, but there was no license plate. And so he just used it to transport parts. Well, the whole deal was, and I'll save you all the details of this, but the whole deal was I had to get the documents that said that this guy was the executor of the estate, then I could take it to the DMV. Long story short, no one could get in touch with the guy, all the papers were missing, so I had a car with no license plate, and I got pulled over probably 3 times a week because they thought it was a stolen car. But the DMV told me, they said, as long as you have all the paperwork, the title, because I had the signed title, insurance, all that stuff, just show it to the cop, and they'll say, okay, yeah, you're good, they'll look you up. So I did that for probably, I don't even know, 6 months maybe. Every week, 3 times a week, I got pulled over in this car. And so I started to pray, like, God, figure something out. Either let me get this license plate, or I need to figure out how to save for a new car and all this kind of stuff. So I'm driving one day with my son, and I get pulled over. Nothing out of the normal, right? So I pull over. My son, who at the time was 6 or 7, he's like, Dad, is everything okay? I'm like, yeah, it's, go through the whole deal. He's been in the car with me when I got pulled over before. We'll go through the whole deal. So I give him the paperwork. The cop's like, okay, yeah, let me look it up. 10 minutes, I'll be right back. And so I'm just hanging out with my son, and he's like, is everything okay? 30 minutes, just about 30 minutes go by, and I'm like, something's not right. The cop comes back, and he says, can you step out of the car? I was like, sure. And so he steps out, and he's like, I don't want to do this in front of your son, but there's a warrant out for your arrest. And so at that point, I was like, what are you okay, so it caught me off guard. So I said, can I call my ex-wife to at least come get my son, all this stuff. So she came and got him, and they put me in cuffs while he was walking to my wife, and he saw it all, which I've talked to him since. There's been some healing there too, but it really traumatized him. And so I'm in cuffs. They're putting me in the back of a cop car, and they park my car, the car with no license plate. They park it in the church parking lot, and they're driving me to the station. And I'm like, I don't understand. I don't know what's going on. They couldn't tell me any information until we got to the police station. So I'm like, okay. Well, they come back when we get to the police station. They're like, listen, do you know this person? And they read the name on the paper. And I was like, yeah, I know them. And they said, well, they said you stole their identity. I was like, what? Why would I? So, long story short, I'm arrested. I'm put in jail. And it was a short period of time. It was 10 days. But when I get arrested, I have no idea what's going on. And I'm trying to call people to get bonded out and all this, but all my family's up north, I'm down south, so no one will do it. So I'm taken into the jail and, until my court date. Well, my court date shows up and they just reschedule it. And I didn't even know they rescheduled it. So now the plan was for me to be in jail for the next 4 months. And right, so that's what I was thinking. So I'll tell you what, I've never had a panic attack in my life, but I think I had 3 of them while I was in jail. Because I just felt like, and I know there's people's stories way worse than mine, but the hopeless feeling of, I don't know why I'm in here, and I'm not going to see my kids, at least for 4 months. And then I was being told that it still could be, like if I'm guilty, there could be a longer sentence. Or if we go to trial, because I wasn't pleading guilty to what I didn't do, that it could be 5 years, that they would just push this back and push this back. So I'm in this hopeless state. Well, long story short, a family member that I never would expect to have done this decided that she was going to bond. My sister was like, I'll pay the bond. I didn't know all this was happening. My sister said she's going to pay the bond. Her daughter, my niece, who I see at holidays, was going to drive to North Carolina 10 hours to come get me out of jail. So I didn't know all this was happening. Well, one morning they came and got me, and the bail bondsman actually came and got me out. So now I'm out of jail, and I don't know what's going on, right? And so I'm having to figure out if I still have a house or if I still have a car. So long story even longer, my car ends up getting towed. So now I don't have a car. So I had to walk from the jail to where the car was, which I thought was about, I severely misunderstood the mileage. I thought it was like 5 miles. It took me like 6 hours to walk to this place. And so I'm like dying, right? And so my car's not there. I don't know what's going on. I'm calling people, find out it was towed. So I had to call an Uber, all this crazy stuff. Well, I get my car back and so I call my boss, and they had suspended me because they didn't hear from me. So when I got arrested, I didn't even think, my mind wasn't call my boss and stuff. So I didn't even call them. And then when they gave me like a minute to write down any phone numbers, and they said, these are the only numbers you're going to be able to take with you. Well, I wrote down like my mom, my son. I wasn't thinking. And so I never called him. So they thought I just didn't show up for work. So when I get out, I tell them, hey, this is what happened. They're like, okay, cool. But because it was at a school, and now I have this on my record, it was a pending felony charge on my record, I couldn't continue working there because it was around kids. Even though it had nothing to do with kids, I couldn't work there. So now I lost the job that got me out of homelessness, and now I'm fighting this pending felony charge with a court-appointed lawyer. And basically, the DA didn't want to take a loss on the books, so they didn't want to dismiss the case. Because what happened, like the whole deal was, I was being accused of doing something, and I had all the evidence that I didn't do it. And so I went back to the person who thought it was me, and like unknowingly filed this police report. And I was like, can you drop the charges? Can you call the DA? And they did, but the DA wouldn't do it. So I could either plead guilty to a felony and take my chances, or I can plead down to a misdemeanor. And if I kept saying I don't want to plead to a felony, but I don't want to take the deal, they said, well, this could drag on. This will just be on your record forever. And so I'm like, okay. So I took the misdemeanor so that I can get to court and get the process rolling. So I was put on probation, and through this whole process, I had lost everything. So I lost my job, lost all the money that I had saved. And so this was back in September. This happened this past September.
This past September?
Yeah, this past September.
Dang.
So here I am with thinking, God, I've surrendered everything, and now this is like I'm rewarded with jail. So in the midst, right? So in January, I get into a car accident, and my car is totaled. So now I'm out of jail at this point, still trying to figure out this whole what's on my record, misdemeanor court thing, probation thing. And now my car's totaled, so I don't have a car. Well, it doesn't have a license plate, so technically it's not, the title's not in my name. So the insurance company, because it wasn't my fault, wanted to pay me, but they couldn't because it's not in my name. So now I'm just like, God, you I landed a job, you took that from me. You put me in jail, so you took all that stuff from me. Then the only mode of transportation to go get a job, any job, you took that from me. So I'm like, what in the world is happening? So that's what has happened since me surrendering. But I'll tell you what. So,
hold on, but you see, that was after a prayer. You said, "Let me get this license plate figured out," and then boom, all that.
Yes. So Brandon, I've been praying for God to figure out this license plate or get me a new car. I didn't think he'd put me in an accident.
No, man.
Yeah, so he totals the car, and the funny thing is, I have a new car now, and now a friend of mine helped me, and some family helped, and so I was able to get a car. So I have a car now, but it was a long process without a car. So I couldn't see my kids. I couldn't get to things. I couldn't get a job unless I could walk to it. And where I'm living, there wasn't anything within walking distance that was hiring, not enough to maintain a house. So it's been, and this was all after all of this started to happen after I got down on my knees and surrendered my life to Jesus. And I was like, really? Like, some part of me thought, man, I wasn't even this bad off before I surrendered. So, but I'll tell you what, in the midst of all this stuff, I learned something. I learned a couple things. Like, God had to come and get me. I would not have got to the place I am today on my own. Maybe I would have. Maybe it would have taken a long, but God had to literally come and get me. And unfortunately, fortunately, all of those things that I went through, whether by my own choices or not, were part of him getting me, and bringing me to him. And so I knew through this whole process, the thing I kept saying was, God built me for this. Like, God built me for these things. And so I didn't crumble. I wasn't destroyed because he built me for this. But he knew, who he wants me to be. It involved going through all this crap. And so, yeah, so not that I would ever wish to go back through that, but I am so grateful that I went through all that stuff. Because I often say I've been to hell and back. And I know God brought me out of it, but I learned the hard way. I had to scratch and crawl and my way out of all this brokenness, but God used that to come and get me. So I'm super grateful for all of it. I don't want to go through it again, but
Yeah, heck no, you don't. Dude, that's crazy. I use the same phrase many times because Romans 12:2, do not be transformed by this world, or do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I had to start changing my internal dialogue. And so, it seemed like for just a long period of time, man, like the weight of the world just kept crashing down on me. And I'm like, I'm doing all the right things.
yeah.
And so that was some of the verbiage I used to use was like, I start, instead of being like, this sucks, I can't believe this.
Yeah.
I started saying, I'm built for this. I'm made for this.
Yeah.
And then towing that line of like, okay, don't get cocky because I don't want this to be ego driven,
right.
But I'm built for this.
Right.
And which is tough. That's another whole nother thing of its own. Especially people who are driven. It sounds like you're driven, dude. You've lived through some things that like a lot of people would have folded, man. Where a year and a half of homelessness and a truck broke down. And, like a lot of people fold right there. So understanding like, man, I know I'm tough. I know I'm a survivor. Like I know that I can get through, without putting myself on a pedestal, like things most people couldn't,
right.
Or statistically haven't,
right.
At least, but then all of a sudden we got to like toe this line of like, okay, don't let this become some ego driven thing, which can be difficult. You go back to the 5-year-old who saw like, okay, being in control is masculine. Then we're coming out of this, story of like complete brokenness and understanding like I'm built for something greater.
Yes.
Now it's like, okay, is this ego or is this like just God showing me like I've created you to be something better than what you've been living through, and it's tough, ain't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And you said is exactly right. I started to think like, why not me, right? Because I used to think, why me, right? So like, God, why are you doing this to me? Why? Like, really? I'm going to be in jail for no reason? And so then I started to think, like, why not me? Because I can handle it. And like you said, it was, I mean, in a sense, I could handle it. Because it broke me. I mean, it definitely broke me, but it didn't kill me. And so once I started to realize, like, okay, there's something God has for me. I don't know, I may not know fully what it is, but God has something for me, and I wasn't ready. And so I had to go through some things, for him to get me ready for whatever he has. And I still don't fully know what that is, but I'm like, okay, you made me for this, so you got to see it through. And it's funny that you mentioned like the getting cocky, because that when I started to put out this podcast, I was praying hard for my podcast, not for the podcast, but just that someone would be able to hear my story and be encouraged to make it through a tough time. And I prayed against. I didn't want to do all the things that people were encouraging me to do with the podcast. I just wanted to tell my story, have somebody listen, and they were like, "Oh, you should do this and this and this." And I kept battling. I'm like, I don't want this to be about me doing a podcast. Like, I wanted just my story, and I don't know how else to get it out. And so I started to get my story out, and I started to see people asking questions or saying like, hey, I went through something like this. What was this? And so I just continued to pray, like, man, if this would only help even just one person, then it's all worth it. My whole story is worth it then. But it's a battle, because I'm like, I don't want this. You get kind of like, oh yeah, I made it through that.
Well, and because the world beats you down, like you're already beat down, and there's judgment, this isn't me pointing fingers and blaming anybody in this world, but going through it, living through it, like being on this side of it's one thing.
Right.
Being in the midst of it and feeling the judgment and sitting up at 10:30, 11, midnight,
Yep.
out underneath the stars with nowhere to go, wanting to ask for money, panhandle, but like feeling like I don't want to get rejected.
Mm-hmm.
Like living in those moments is a total different thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And when you come through it and God delivers you from, the brokenness, the shame, the guilt,
mm-hmm.
And the hurt that you've caused yourself, and the hurt that the world caused you, and you start to feel joy again, like you want to give back.
Yeah.
You want to tell your story. You want to let people know, like, man, I have been there.
Yeah.
And and I know. I mean, I hate to say things, Jay, like I know how you felt, or I know, because we're all different, right? But
right. No,
I can tell you my story, and I know how I felt,
mm-hmm.
and I felt like there was no hope.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like you, brother, creating a platform to be like, hey, there is hope.
Yeah.
Whether you got transportation or not, whether you got shelter or not, whether you are dealing with addiction or a false image or not, like there is hope. And so you and me are totally aligned. I'm rooting for your podcast, Unfeigned Podcast. To all my listeners out there, go and check it out. It's just real, authentic testimony, storytelling, and the world's just yearning for that, Jay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's awesome, dude. I'm gonna be a guest on your podcast. I think we're here in about a week.
Yes.
Yes. So everybody tune into that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, through all of this, and you mentioned it. You mentioned changing your mindset, and like one thing, I know I'll never go back. And one thing that I try to tell people is I say a lot that I'm healed, right? I'm walking in my healed version of me, but that doesn't mean that it's all that stuff still doesn't pull at me. You know what I mean? And so there's still the temptation, and there's still that old way of thinking that I have to battle against. It's just different now how I deal with it. But during that whole time, these are things that like really helped me focus. I came up with two like mantras, and then I stole one from somebody else. But and I got it. I don't know if you ever seen like the Ted Lasso stuff, but I saw a reel, and it was about him playing darts or something. And he said he saw a quote, and it's "Be curious, not judgmental." And so I started to, throughout this whole time, I started to ask questions, and I stopped looking at people and coming up with my own assumptions, and I started to ask questions, because that's not what people did to me. People assumed some things, and they never asked questions. They may have found out if they did. The other two things that I came up with this was I always used to say, whatever you give your attention to, you will become attracted to. Whatever you become attracted to, you will pursue. So I started to repeat that to me over and over and over. Whatever I was giving my attention to, that's the thing I'm going to run after. And so what were the things I was giving my attention to? Because at that point, before the surrender, it was sex. It was sexual addiction. And that's what I kept giving my attention to, and I kept running to it. Then I became attracted to it, and then I just pursued it. Every chance I was feeling depressed or anxious or whatever, I would go to that, because that's where my attention was. And I realized that I had to shift what I just gave my attention to. And I started to give my attention to the Word of God, to prayer, to people that would speak into my life instead of like judging. And so I started to give my attention to those things, and real shifts in my mind started to happen when I did that. And then the other thing was I just kept saying to myself, choose, commit, confront. I kept saying that. So I had to choose to be different. Like I had to choose not to be homeless. I had to choose not to look at pornography. And so I made the choice, and then I had to commit to doing whatever it took to stay with that choice. And then the hardest part was I had to confront all the stuff, all the reasons why I did all that. And so still, I'm still tempted every once in a while when there's like a low point, every time I have to give my kids back. We co-parent and it's fine. But every time I have to give my kids back to my ex-wife, that's like one of the lowest parts for me. Because I just spent time with them, I love my kids, and I have to give them back, and now I go home to an empty house. And it's those times where normally I would run to pornography. When I felt out of control or chaotic or whatever. And so now I just remind myself, that whatever I'm giving my attention to, or the choose, commit, confront. And so I'm still kind of attacked by those things. But now I'm like, I don't have to do that. I don't have to be a slave to that anymore. That, that stuff's been redeemed, and I can choose to look this, So those are things I'm super grateful. That's why I'm grateful that I went through what I went through. But
I'll tell you this, Jay, Steelers fan aside, man, you seem like a good dude. Let me give a big hooday real quick. I love my Bengals, man. And you guys beat up on us for years, dude. So we just got to get that on air.
Yeah, we've been struggling.
But hey, so leave us with one lasting thought, man. For anybody out there who feels just like overwhelmed with what they're dealing with, whether it's homelessness, addiction, maybe it's, the fact that they've, acted out sexually and they don't feel like they could ever forgive themselves. Whatever the case may be, anybody out there that might be listening that thinks like, these redemption stories of Jay and Brandon will never happen for me. What would you say to them?
Yeah, if I can only say one thing, I would say this is what gave me hope. Sometimes we think that Jesus is off to the side and waiting for us to come to him. But he's in it. He's in our brokenness. He's in it when I'm dealing with sexual addiction, when I'm dealing with any kind of addiction or marital problems, whatever. He's there, and it's not like he's off in the distance and we have to then get out of whatever we're in and go to him. Like he's there with us, and there is nothing that's too far gone. Nothing. No matter what, any circumstance, 100 times worse than mine, is still not too far gone. And the thing that helps, the reason why there's hope is we can make a choice to just lean into Jesus. And it really is just about, we have it within ourselves to change our mind. And Jesus, we don't have to go chase him. He's right there. And there's nothing anyone could have done or is doing that Jesus is afraid of or will reject you, or he's there. So there's nothing makes you too far gone. You're not too broken. You can change your mind. But I would say lean into Christ, whether you have faith or not. It's true because it's true, not because we like it or not, and it works. I mean, I had faith and I became faithless, and I chose to lean in, and he really does. He's able to redeem whatever.
Love that, brother. Thank you so much. Yeah, nothing is too far gone. I don't care how many people you've slept with. I don't care if you got a pending court case. Yep. I don't care if you're in the bowels of addiction right now. I couldn't agree with you more, brother Jay. Nobody or nothing is too far gone if we can just learn to surrender, give everyone and everything to God. So thank you so much. I want to encourage everyone, go check out the Unfeigned podcast. And if you need a spelling on that, it's UNFEIGNED. FEIG, Unfeigned Podcast. I'm looking forward to being a guest on that podcast. I think we record in a week or two.
Yeah, I think
I'll
so.
have to check my dates on that next week. And then in the meantime, check out the social medias, Facebook, Instagram. We got Step 4 releasing this fall. Super excited about that. And if you're interested, become a Recovery Couch Insider. We just started a Patreon page for anybody who wants to get like access to Q&A sessions, bonus episodes, and we'd love for you guys to join that. So until the next time, just remember you always have a seat right here on the Recovery Couch. This episode of the Recovery Couch is brought to you by True Story Media, where real stories find their voice. Whether it's podcasting, video production, or publishing powerful testimonies, True Story Media exists to help people share messages that matter. If you've got a story of transformation, faith, or recovery, True Story Media will help you tell it with excellence and impact. You can learn more about True Story Media at www.recoverycouch.com so you can start telling your true story today. Whoa, that was an incredible conversation with Jay Miller, a man who proves that redemption is possible no matter how dark the road has been. From addiction and homelessness to finding purpose in Christ, Jay's story shows us that God's grace doesn't just patch us up, it makes us new. If you or somebody you know is wrestling with your past or struggling to believe you can change, let Jay's words encourage you. You are never too far gone. I want to thank you for joining me on this episode of the Recovery Couch. Don't forget to check out our Patreon page. Join us where you can get live Q&As and some behind-the-scenes bonus content. Also, Step 4, A Journey Through Addiction, my autobiography, is on pre-sale now. If you'd like a copy, get with me through Brandon at recoverycouch.com, or just go to the website and send us an email and we can get you a copy before the book releases. Until next time, keep showing up, keep pressing forward, and remember, healing begins the moment that you surrender.